Hi, welcome to Helius' Solana Frontend Developer course. In today's video, we're going to teach you how to send SOL using JavaScript and integrating that into a React application. My name is Nathan Galindo. I'm a developer experience engineer at Helius. I'm based in Texas and I'm a full stack Solana developer. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter to ask me any questions about Helius, Solana, or this course. In today's video, we're going to walk through the project and I'm going to explain to you exactly what we're building. And then we're going to go through the project together and build it out. And then I'm going to show you some React best practices by refactoring some of the components that we create. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. So I'm going to assume that you have your Solana development environment set up already. If not, please go ahead and reference video 2 in this video series. That's where we set up your Solana development environment and download the course app that you'll need to follow along with this project and all future projects in this course. But assuming you have that all set up and you're ready to go, let's go ahead and navigate to the pages folder in the course app and then to the project send SOL. And then like me, go ahead and open up the starter file and the finished file right next to it so we can reference the code as we build it. And then we can go ahead and navigate to the send SOL project, to the preview, and let's go ahead and connect our Solana wallet. So we can go ahead and connect our Solana wallet just like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the address of my local Solana wallet like so, using my CLI tool, paste that in, and then I'm going to let's send 0.5 SOL to my wallet, and then let's go ahead and press submit. Mind you, I am connected to the testnet network on my Phantom wallet. Let's go ahead and approve this transaction. Approve. And just like that, our transaction succeeded. We know because we have the transaction signature right here, and we can click on this item. It's actually a link URL pointing to the Solana Block Explorer that shows that our transaction was successful and it has been finalized. And so that's essentially how the application works. It's pretty simple, but it teaches us some good skills and best practices for Solana development and React. So let's go ahead, navigate to our starter file and open up the return statement with a pair of React fragments, and feel free to copy the dependencies like so. Oops, let me go ahead and do a better job like that. Copy the dependencies. Okay, fantastic. So these are all the dependencies you'll need for this project. So what we're going to do is we're going to initialize our state variables. Let's go ahead and do that. And although I copy and pasted the dependencies, and feel free to do that as well, I highly recommend you type out the code yourself because that's the best way to really ingrain what you're learning into your brain. So let's go ahead and set up our state variables for the application. So what are state variables? Well, essentially, they're the variables that we are going to update throughout the lifecycle of our app. So as users are performing functions and interacting with our application, these variables are the ones that we're going to be updating throughout that process. So, oops, and you do so using the React useState function. And so you might be wondering to yourself, if you're new to React, what's the difference between the purple variable and the green variable? Well, the purple variable is our state variable. That's the state that we'll be updating essentially. It's equivalent to the initial state that we set within these parentheses. The green variable isn't a variable. It's more so a function that we use to update this variable. And by convention, we label this function set, and then whatever it is that we title our state variable. So just like that, we set up the variables, the state variables for our application. Now we're going to grab some functions and some variables that allow us to access information about the wallet that's connected to our application via the Solana Wallet Adapter. So variables get info about Solana Wallet Adapter, essentially. Okay, well, we're going to use extrapolation to extrapolate this connection variable from this useConnection function. And then we're going to extrapolate this public key, which gives us the public key of the wallet that's connected, and this send transaction function that allows us to send the transaction to the Solana blockchain. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Now, before we get into the business logic, this handle transaction function, let's actually take a look at this use effect. So what is a use effect? Well, use effect is a React hook. So it's a function from the React library that allows us to execute code depending on certain state changes. So, and we define those state changes within this, within these brackets. So the state changes that we're watching here are the connection variable and the public key variable. So why is that, and what does that mean? Well, whenever a user connects their wallet to our application, the variables that are updated are the connection variable and the public key variable. And so basically what we're saying is, whenever user connects wallet to app, run code. Now, what code are we gonna run? Good question. We're gonna run this function that we defined here called getInfo. So const getInfo, it's an asynchronous function. And we're saying if connection exists and a public key exists, so if there is a connection, then we're going to grab information about the wallet that connected to our app. So we're gonna use that connection variable, instantiate or use this method, getAccountInfo method, and pass in the public key of the wallet that's connected to our app. And then we're going to update one of the state variables, balance, using the setBalance function, like so. Info, we're gonna grab LAM ports. LAM ports is a fractional unit of SOL. One LAM port equals 1/1,000,000th of a SOL token. So we're gonna divide that number by the number 1 billion, but we use this shortcut, LAM ports per SOL from the Web3.js library. And then because this is an asynchronous function, we have to call it like so. Okay, awesome. So there is us instantiating our state variables, grabbing info about our wallets, and then setting the state of our application once a user connects to their wallet to our application. Now let's get into the business logic of our app, handle transaction. So what are we doing here? Well, we want to create a transaction, create an instruction, and then send transaction to Solana. That's essentially what we're trying to accomplish with this handle transaction function. But before we dive deeper into that, let's actually discuss what a Solana transaction is. So let me open up this file, and this file will be included in the description of this YouTube video if you want to reference it. But what is a transaction on Solana? So here's a more in-depth, detailed visual of really what the anatomy of a Solana transaction looks like. You have your message header, you have account addresses. So Solana transactions predefine which accounts on the blockchain they will read or write to. And then you have a block hash, which block hash the transaction was included in. But most importantly, for the purpose of our video, you have a list of instructions. And these instructions are responsible for for performing the operations you want to accomplish on the Solana blockchain. And so essentially the lifecycle of a transaction is it's submitted to a Solana cluster via an RPC API, which, mind you, Helius makes RPC APIs. So if you're ever interested in exploring RPC APIs or learning more about them, you can reference the Helius blog. But let's get back to our chart. So we have a transaction, we have an instruction. We're going to instantiate both of these in our function in just a moment. And then using the send transaction function, we're going to send this via an RPC API to Solana, where it's going to interact with the system program to send SOL from one wallet to another. So let's get into that right now. So first, we're going to do some error handling. Error handling, check if wallet is connected. Because we're writing to the state of the blockchain, right? We're changing the state by sending one SOL from one account to another. We have to sign for that transaction, but you can only sign for that transaction if a wallet is connected to your app. So that's why we need to check if a wallet is connected. So let's do that. And if it's not connected, then we're going to throw an error, please connect your wallets, and then we're going to return the function just like so to prevent further execution. Now we're going to create a transaction object like so, const transaction new. So we're instantiating a new transaction object using the Web3.js library. And then we're going to create instructions. And these are the this is the instruction we're going to append to our transaction object. Now remember how I said we will be invoking the system program on the Solana blockchain? That's why we use this system program class from the Web3.js library. And then we're accessing the transfer function. We're going to open that with some curly brackets, and we're going to define who the SOL is coming from. Well, it's coming from the wallet that's connected to our app. How many LAMP ports do we want to send? Well, we're leaving that up to the user, so we'll include this amount state variable. Let's divide that by 1 billion. And then we're going to send it to, again, we're going to leave that up to our user by including this state variable. And then once we've done that, we're going to add our instruction to transaction with this simple line of code, instruction, and just like that, we've instantiated a transaction, but it's empty. So it currently looks like this, it's empty. And then we instantiate an instruction, but it exists on its own. And using this line of code, we insert our instruction into our transaction like you see here in this visual. Okay, fantastic. So we've pretty much set up most of our business logic. Let's go ahead and take care of this try catch sequence, which is very important to take note of if you're new to React applications or just JavaScript in general. So when you're creating an asynchronous function, you're most likely calling some kind of service that's external to your application, right? And this service can sometimes fail you, right? Sometimes API calls don't always work, and sometimes they take different amounts of times to finalize. That's why we use asynchronous, because it's an asynchronous operation. The amount of time this operation might take is not deterministic. So in these cases, we use a try catch block. And it's pretty semantic. The try block contains the code you want to perform. The catch block catches any errors. And we also use the finally block, which is a little less common, but it basically executes code after try catch sequence. So regardless of whether the call succeeds or fails, the code within this finally block will always execute. And I like to use this to reset our state variables like so, just to kind of clean up our UI and provide a better user experience. Get element by ID. And then we're going to reset this value to an empty string. Get element by ID. Amount, oops. Value equals empty string. Okay, fantastic. Now let's go ahead and see what kind of code we're trying to perform. Well, we have our transaction with instruction included. So now all we have left to do is send our transaction to the blockchain. And so we're going to do that like so. We're going to await, send transaction, First, we're going to pass in the transaction object and then the connection to our Solana cluster. And then assuming this succeeds, we're going to update our transaction signature state variable using set transaction signature, just like so. Okay, awesome. Now, we're going to calculate the new balance of our app or of our wallet and display that on our app, just like so. New balance. Okay, fantastic. Now what happens if this code doesn't succeed? Well, we're gonna wanna log that error for development purposes. And maybe we wanna throw that error on the UI so the user is aware that the transaction did not go through. Now, one last thing before we start building the UI of our app, we're going to create an array of objects that defines the UI, the list of elements we want to display on our UI. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, what do we want to display? That's the real question. We want to display, maybe a title. So we have a title, account balance. And then dependency, that's basically, what kind of value are we rendering to the right side? And we're rendering that balance state variable. And then we're going to instantiate a new title for a new item, a new object for a new item, transaction signature. And that dependency is going to be the transaction signature. And we're also going to provide a link using string interpolation. And you can just copy this. You don't have to type out the link letter by letter. That's unnecessary. So we're using string interpolation using backticks to programmatically insert our transaction signature within this URL string. And so that way, when you saw me click this item, that's how we're able to do that, because we're providing a URL to the Solana Block Explorer. Okay, fantastic. So just like that, we've pretty much set up the business logic for our entire application. Now we're gonna get to the meat of our app, probably the most interesting part of our app, which is the UI. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So feel free to erase those React fragments and instantiate a main tag. Now, I still recommend you type out the CSS of this app. We're using Tailwind CSS. It's my favorite styling framework. Maybe CSS isn't the reason why you're watching this app, but if you're new to React and you're new to Next.js, it's always best practice to type out everything manually, so that way you kind of learn how it works. So what are we doing here? Well, we're saying within this main, we want to open up a section, and it's going to be made up of columns, vertical columns, 6 of them, each column having a gap of 4, and we're going to put a padding of 4 around this entire section. And then we're gonna open up a form. We're gonna give it some styling. We're gonna round out the edges a little bit, give it the height of the content that exists inside of it. We're gonna give it a little bit of padding. We're gonna give it a specialized background color. You can go ahead and copy and paste that. And then we're gonna, on any screen size larger than small, col span 6, there we go. We're gonna have it take up 6 columns on any screen size larger than large screens, such as my laptop screen. We're going to have it start at the 2nd column and end at the 6th column, just like that. Okay. And so now we're going to create 3 divs, or I guess 4 divs. So let's go ahead and do that. 4 divs. So that's 1, that's 2, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And what are these divs? What are these divs for? Okay, let's talk about it. And we can put comments to make our code a little bit more readable as well. So in this div is our header. You can kind of tell because there's our title and there's a submit button. So we can call this our header. So this is how you write comments within your JSX header. Now this code, this section is the input, the address input. So we can do address input. This section is the amount input. You can just tell by reading the code. And then finally, we have our display values. Display values. Okay, fantastic. So now that we've got our sections set up within our form, let's go ahead and build it out. So first, we're gonna give our header some styling. Flex, justify between, which means we're going to completely, to the farthest extent, space out the items within this div. And then we're going to define 2 items, a header of font bold. We're going to make that text a little bit larger, and we're going to give it the color of Helius orange. You can give it any color you want, but of course, I'm going to give mine Helius orange. And let's go ahead and give it an emoji, because why not? Now we're going to create a button, the submit button, and we're going to give it some styling, but also some logic. Now, because this one is a little bit longer and it's not super important, you can go ahead and copy and paste that styling. I won't hold it against you. And then we're going to put in the on-click parameter, and we're going to pass in a function, but not just any function, the handle transaction function we created earlier. So basically, whenever a user clicks this button, it's our handle transaction function that's being executed. Now we also want to put in put in some logic that determines when this button is disabled. Now, why would we do that? Because it's better user experience that way. It's always good to put in, logical parameters that determine when a button is able to be activated or not. And so that's maybe something you want to keep in mind as you build out your React applications moving forward and for your own projects. Okay, so let's move on to the input values. So the styling for this div is pretty simple. We're just giving it some spacing from the item above. And then we're going to create a title, address of receiver, And then we're gonna give that some styling as well. So italic, italic, and then make that text small. And then we're gonna provide the input section. Okay, so we're gonna give it the ID of accounts. The type of this value is text. The placeholder, we want to be something semantic, something easy for the user to understand, and that gives them some kind of hints of what kind of value to provide. So we'll put that. The color of the text, I put this custom color, so you can go ahead and just copy and paste this CSS like so. And then the most interesting part of this input value is this onChange parameter. So what is this happening? Well, whenever this input value, the state of this input value changes, so essentially whenever we type anything into this input value, this function, the function that we define within these curly brackets, is going to be executed. And that function is going to be our state updater function. We're going to update the account state variable using essentially whatever input we've provided in this input field. And we access that value by event target value, just like so. Okay. And then we're going to create our amount input. It's going to look very similar. So we can do number amount, italic, text small, input. Oops, we're gonna open that up. Okay, and then we're gonna give it the ID of amount. This one's gonna be a numerical value, so its type is gonna be number. The minimum value is gonna be 0 because we can't send negative SOL, obviously. The placeholder is going to be amount of SOL to send, right? Something, again, obvious and just easy to follow. Class name, again, feel free to copy this CSS. And then, of course, we're going to use that onChange parameter, and we're going to update the amount state variable. Oops, there, awesome. So just like that, we've created most of our UI, but now we're gonna get to probably the most interesting part of our UI. And if you're new to React, this section might look a little bit confusing to you, but let's go ahead and walk through it together. So let's go ahead and give our div some styling. So the text is going to be small, but we want the text to also be a little bit bold. We're gonna provide some spacing from the top of our application. We're gonna give it a custom background color to make it stand out. We're gonna give it some border coloring. We're gonna round out the edges, and we're gonna give it some padding so it stands out from the rest of the app as well. Okay, fantastic. Now we're gonna create an unordered list. We're gonna give that some padding as well. And now we're gonna open up some curly brackets. So what are we doing here? Well, what we can do is instead of basically typing out the HTML for every single item we wanna write to our application, we wanna display on our application. If the UI items are kind of repetitive, right, and they use similar elements, we can actually programmatically display these items by looping over a data structure that contains the unique values for each UI item. Okay, so that might sound confusing, but essentially, in common speak, we're going to loop over this outputs array. So we're going to loop over each object and extract the variables from each object and use those variables to populate our UI. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to define our outputs. We're going to use the JavaScript map method. We're going to open up those parentheses and then open up another set of parentheses and then open up a set of curly brackets. And here's where we're going to extract those variables. So we have title, dependency, and href. And then outside of the curly brackets, we're going to instantiate an index variable. and then we're going to use an arrow function, and then we're going to open up a pair of parentheses, not curly brackets, because this way we're doing an implicit return. Okay, now we're going to instantiate a list item. Now, because we're programmatically rendering these UI elements, we have to provide a key value, so we're going to use our title. And here's something interesting that you might not have seen before if you're new to React. We're going to use string interpolation to programmatically update the CSS of our UI elements. And you can actually go ahead and copy and paste that. But basically we're saying if the index of this item is not 0, so if this is not the first item in the array, then we're going to give it some vertical spacing from the items above it. And so that's why we have vertical spacing between the transaction signature item and the account balance item. Okay, fantastic. So we've instantiated our list item. Now let's fill it with some content. So first, we're going to give it that text, that initial text on the left side. And we do so by first giving it some CSS, some letter spacing, and then inserting the title value there. Simple enough. And now we're going to open up another set of curly brackets to programmatically render this A tag depending on whether or not this dependency value exists, or if the dependency value is, has some kind of substance. So we do that by saying, if dependency exists, then we're going to render an A tag with the following parameters. So href is the link to the external website we want to go to. Target_blank essentially tells our application that we're going to open that link in a separate window, and we use rel for that as well. And then we have some CSS. Again, we're programmatically updating the CSS. And essentially what we're saying here is, if the href exists, then we're going to give it a hover state value. And that also just improves the UI and the UX. And now what we want to render, we're going to convert that to a string. And then we're going to take the first 25 characters. And essentially what this is our transaction signature that you see here. And then we're also going to include the external link icon that we're importing from Hero Icons, my favorite icon library. Highly recommend you check it out. And just like that, we've basically completed our application. Congratulations. Now I'm going to take it one step further than even what's included in this finished file and teach you a little bit about refactoring. And so if you're already an experienced React developer, you definitely don't need to watch this part of the video. But if you're new to React and new to front-end development in general, then you might want to learn a little bit about how we refactor our React applications. And for that, I've prepared a little graphic here. So basically, we have this code here where we are rendering kind of the same UI elements over and over and over again. And it makes our code look a little bit complicated, a little bit scary and bloated. So what if we can just put this repetitive piece of code in a separate location and just kind of import it where it's needed. And that way we can even import that piece of code in other places in our application if it's needed, without having to write all this new code all over again. Well, that's exactly what refactoring is all about. It's about simplifying our code, making it more modular, more readable, more maintainable. And that's what we're going to do here right now. So what I want you to do is go ahead and actually copy this code right here, this list item code. Open up your folder, and within your send sol folder locally, go ahead and create a list item JSX folder, and make sure that it's capitalized. Both list and item are capitalized, because that's convention. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a list item element and export it like so. And we're going to return this list item. Let me fix that. Okay, fantastic. So notice how we're still passing in these parameters. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a curly bracket. So we're going to include those parameters. So we have title, we have dependency, we have href, and I think those are all the dependencies. Oh, and index. And we're going to import our libraries, and we're also going to import that external link icon. Okay, and just like that, I mean, simple enough, we've basically refactored this code into another file. All we need to do now is really just delete this code and open up our component and pass in each variable like so. Dependency, and pass in our dependency, then our href, and then our index value. And then we can delete this, and we can import our list item from our local folder. Fantastic, and our code's working. And if we navigate to our starter file, we can see that our application is up and running, and it looks pretty good. Now, the moment of truth. Let's see if it's functioning the way we intend. So let's go ahead and connect our wallet. Okay, that works. Our state has been updated. Let's go ahead and grab a Solana address that we can send some SOL to. And I'm going to send 0.1 SOL and click submit. I'm going to authorize this transaction. And just like that, our transaction successfully went through. And we can look on the Solana Block Explorer that the result was successful and our transaction was just now finalized. Fantastic. Okay, awesome. So before we close out this video, I received some questions from some viewers of the series about Next.js and specifically the file structure. It seems like there's some confusion about just, why is Next.js have such like an interesting, maybe even confusing file structure. We have like this app tsx file that has a bunch of nonsense in it that maybe looks unfamiliar. And what is it for? What does it do? What's the point? Well, I created this simple visual for you to kind of explain this concept. So essentially, this file structure is to kind of compartmentalize some of the logic and rendering logic of our application. So essentially, you can notice that in our app tsx file, we have kind of global components and dependencies and styling that should exist throughout our application, regardless of which page we're on, which project we're looking at. And so this kind of handles that rendering logic, right? We're always gonna want our nav bar. We're always gonna, on every page, display the toast container, right? And this component section with the page props property is used to render the active page components, basically. So whichever page that we're on, right, whether it be our landing page, such as here, or project 1, the finished file, or the starter file, that's all being handled by that component. So in short, app.tsx provides a way to maintain a consistent layout and state across our application, regardless of which page we're on. And so I just thought that might be some helpful information for those of you that are new to Next.js. Please feel free to get connected with me on X, to get connected with the Helius team on Discord, or to learn more about Helius via our website. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Peace out.